In episode 16, I speak in depth with mixed martial artist Miesha Tate. Miesha's fierce rivalry with Ronda Rousey is credited with the introduction of the women's division in the UFC. With her extensive knowledge of wrestling and jiu-jitsu, coupled with her fierce determination and her will to win, Miesha realized her dream and captured the UFC Bantamweight title in 2016. After almost 5 years out of the game and now a mother of two, Miesha has come out of retirement and has her sights set on yet another world title. So Miesha Tate, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I know you're incredibly busy preparing for your debut at a lighter weight division. So how are you feeling? How is training going?
I'm feeling light as a feather. I've definitely noticed some changes dropping down in weight. That's been a very interesting process. And I think I've come to understand that I never needed that extra muscle. So I feel a lot less bulky now, and I feel a lot faster. I feel like my cardio is really on point. So may have been my weight class all along, and I'm just now discovering it. So it's pretty exciting.
Wow. I was so happy to hear about your comeback, but we're going to talk about that a little later. What I want to do now, if that's okay, because I have guests on here from various sports, from TV, from music background. So maybe not everybody is very familiar with MMA scene. Okay. So what I want to do is just give a little brief kind of background to yourself. You grew up in Tacoma, Washington. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing and what you were interested in as a child.
I was surprisingly competitive as a child. I never thought that I would be a fighter. I had ambitions of being a veterinarian. I've always been an animal lover, or, an astronaut. I think typical kid things.
Yeah.
But I remember I always gravitated towards playing the games that were typically that the boys were more interested in, typically monkey bar races at recess, getting on the swings and just jumping, getting at the high point, jumping off and seeing who could land the furthest, drawing a line of wood chips, you know what I mean? Like, I was ultra competitive. I love to play those kinds of things. And so anyways, I guess that's a little bit of a telltale sign that could be that I was going to grow up and find probably the most competitive job in the world, and combat. But growing up in Tacoma was simple. I grew up a little bit more on the outskirts on about 5 acres of land. So I definitely played outside a lot. I was kind of one of those kids that when the sun was going down, I would be getting upset because mom was calling me in. I just wanted to be outdoors. And that's,
it was a simpler time. Nice.
It was a simpler time. And, when I got into high school, I kind of stumbled across wrestling.
Actually, that's what I wanted to ask you about next. You started wrestling on the boys' team. Is that right? Did they accept you immediately, or was that a difficult thing?
They certainly didn't. I started on the boys' team because there wasn't a women's team. There was no female wrestling offered. So in that case, they couldn't not allow us to wrestle. I say us because my best friend at the time, Sharon, was my counterpart in this. So there was 2 of us joining the wrestling team, and they certainly didn't make it easy though. They definitely tried to get us to quit. They couldn't tell us we couldn't join, but that didn't mean that they had to make our lives easy or more enjoyable for us to be there. I think the mission was absolutely eliminate the girls as fast as possible, and they don't belong. But we stuck it out, and after a couple of weeks, they started to ease up on us. And the season is only about 2.5 months in high school anyway. So after the first couple weeks, I think they realized, they're not going anywhere, so we might as well just put up with them. And then by my senior year, it was a total change of attitude. I really felt like I became, the sister of the team.
Yeah.
When other girls would come in that really weren't serious about the sport, they'd be like, Miesha, get her,
what it's really about.
Exactly. So, I really felt like it became part of the brotherhood. And I won the coaches award my senior year, which was pretty awesome. Still to this day, one of my proudest accomplishments, because that was at a time when it was not cool to do what I was doing. It wasn't widely accepted. It was very frowned upon. I lost the large majority of my matches against males who had been wrestling, much longer than I had. Most of them start when they're kids, or at least, a couple years before I got the opportunity to. So winning the coaches award goes out to one athlete on the team. And it just kind of says like, this is the person that inspires the team, I guess, or kind of sets an example, like how you want to try to be. It's not always about winning, right? It's about just giving your best. Like you show up, you've worked your hardest, you've won. And that's kind of the mentality that I have continued to transfer over to my MMA career. And also that perception can be changed, even when it's very staunch and heavy set one way. That if you show up every day and you just, cancel out the noise, you don't listen to what people are saying, that you can, more so than say what you're going to do, just show what you're going to do and what you're capable of. And that it's eye-opening, and that people can have a big change of heart. And I learned in high school.
Fantastic. It's so interesting listening to you say these things, because as you're talking about them, obviously I didn't know you when you were in high school, but I'm visualizing moments in your professional career when I started watching you, where those characteristics came out, they repeated. So you obviously always had that within you, which is really nice that it stood to you as well.
I think I did. I think there is something to fight or flight, that some people are naturally born a little bit more in an instinct situation when you don't have time to think. What's your first reaction? Is it fight or is it flight? Neither one is wrong, but some of us were born with certain tendencies and some are born with others. I think I've always been a fighter. I just wouldn't have known it necessarily if I didn't go through wrestling in high school, and if I didn't have to persevere and triumph and dig deep and grow that foundational strength that I had. Because if you don't exercise it, just like the body, you don't use it, you lose it. I feel like maybe I would have never known it was there. I wouldn't have known how tough I was if I wasn't forced to kind of call upon it. And I really think that's what drove me to wrestling, was like, oh, I am discovering something. In hindsight, I look back on it, I realized I was discovering this part of myself that was fascinating and empowering and addicting. And I wanted to grow it and nourish it and do everything that I could to continue to promote this part of my personality, because it just felt like it was me and I was at home and this was the right thing this was what I was meant to do.
I love that. I love that. Such a positive message to send to anybody watching this, to follow your dreams, to pursue your interests, and to give it your all, because it's so easy for someone to have a dream quietly and never actually do anything about it. So well done for that attitude. I love that. You did go on in your final senior year, am I right, to win a state championship. Did that give you the belief that, okay, this is possibly a career or a life path that I could go on?
No, I didn't think so at the time, because I was really, I don't want to say that I was sheltered, but I wasn't aware of anything bigger. And not, to be fair, there wasn't a whole lot else that was going on for women at that time in wrestling, and definitely not in fighting. So I didn't even know that those opportunities really existed outside. So I graduated high school in 2005. That just wasn't a thing.
Sure.
So I ended up going to a college that didn't offer a wrestling program, but that's what kind of caused me to stumble across mixed martial arts.
This is what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yes. And so I went to Central Washington University, and they had just cut the men's wrestling program, I believe, just the year before I attended. So there's kind of all these guys there that were looking for something to do along those lines. So there was a club sport of mixed martial arts. And I think a lot of the wrestlers kind of ended up just funneling there because they didn't have the wrestling program and they were already going to school there, and they didn't transfer out. Some of them did, but some didn't. And that's kind of where I ended up as well, just kind of seeking something out that was like similar to wrestling. And I was like, well, I don't want to fight, but this jujitsu stuff sounds pretty cool. Like, you tell me I can joint lock people and choke people out, and I was all about it. So I was loving that. And then I went to my first amateur fight event, and talk about a visceral reaction. I was so into it, and it surprised me. You know, you could
So
surprise
sorry to cut across you. This was just as a spectator, the first show you went to? Okay,
as a
okay.
spectator. Yes, of course. I went as a spectator, and I didn't know that I was going to have such an intrigued reaction. I didn't know that I was going to really be drawn to it like a moth to a flame. I mean, I had no idea. It really took me for a whirl. And I was watching and I was like, man, that was incredible. And I remember thinking like, I could do that. I mean, if they could do it, I could do it. Mind you, there were no women fighting on that card. But then there was the person who had been refereeing the event was also a promoter themselves. And they got on the microphone afterwards, and obviously collaborating with this event was like, hey, I'm having an all-female event in 3 weeks. Now, if that tells you anything, that they were hurting to find female talent.
Yeah, they were short, yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it wasn't a thing. And an all-female card just was like, wait, what? My ears perked up. I was like, you mean other women are doing this? I'm like, oh, I've got to get in on this. So I made my way down. I signed up, and 3 weeks later, I had a fight under my belt.
Wow, fantastic! That's unbelievable. It was like written, wasn't it, for you to be there for that announcement and for you to go for it? I love it.
Written in the stars. Destiny sometimes has a way of seeking us out, and if we're just ready to jump at that crazy opportunity, you just never know where it's going to lead you. I mean, I think I am a prime example of that, because I never in a million years would have thought that I would have chosen fighting for a profession. You know, I wasn't a street fighter. I'm not like a troubled child or I didn't have like a troubled youth. I know a lot of times fighters kind of, it's not uncommon for fighters to have that backstory, you know, that's like, hey, I had this hardship and fighting kind of saved me. That wasn't my story. Like, I came from a really grounded home. I mean, we didn't always have money. I mean, I didn't grow up wealthy by any means. I ended up wrestling because my parents couldn't afford gymnastics, you know, that kind of a situation. I probably would have been in gymnastics if my parents were well off, but we did it. You know, we struggled at times, but those things are character building, you know, so I'm certainly not ashamed of that whatsoever. But my story, reason and draw to this sport maybe doesn't exactly fit what you might assume someone's past would be.
Absolutely. I know what you mean. Okay. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. It's not always, as you said, a way out for somebody. Like you followed your passion, and I love that. Yeah. What about your family? How did they react, your parents, when you told them this is what you want to do and it became more and more serious?
Well, my mom has always been very supportive. So, you know, kudos to her. My mom is an extremely tough woman as well. Maybe not displaying it physically so much, but she's always been somebody to endure mentally and emotionally and overcome and persevere. So she's been a great role model for me. She was there at my first fight. I think I aged my mom 10 years. I probably took 10 years right off the top in that one. My dad wasn't there. He was not interested in supporting me in something. So, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but at the time, common perception was that this is barbaric, and this is, you know, this is crazy for men to do it, let alone women, and much less his daughter. So I don't think my dad wanted to give any momentum or like, yeah, this is cool. He was like, no, this is not cool. You're going to college. Like, why are you getting your head beaten? You know, who in their right mind thinks that this is a good idea? This is terrible. I know my dad wasn't very thrilled with me wrestling either. He definitely was not my biggest supporter, but I think sometimes we kind of need that. And even sometimes from the people closest to us, if you can use it as motivation, because not everybody's going to be like there to like pump you up and like be like, yeah, this is great. You know, even the people that you would like to think they would, but it was a great motivator for me. It really was. And now my dad's obviously fully on board. When I announced I was coming back from my retirement, he's like, oh, are you sure?
Again?
never easy.
We'll talk about that more later on, because I want to ask you about coming back as a family person now this time. We'll talk about that a little later, and I'm conscious not to use too much of your time, so I want to get through as many questions as possible. You're talking about MMA being perceived as barbaric, and you're absolutely right. I remember, I'll be honest with you, I'm not the most knowledgeable in the sport. It did captivate me because of what Conor McGregor did throughout Ireland. He made it famous in Ireland. Right. Before that, it was known, and I don't mean disrespect to the sport, but this is to back up what you're talking about. It was known as cage fighting. It wasn't seen as an art. It wasn't seen as martial arts or the skill. It was cage fighting. So barbaric. Yes. That's what people were thinking until they became educated in it. Anyway, moving on. I do remember, was it your pro debut? This was very interesting. You had your opponent pinned to the mat. So the wrestling background there was a huge advantage. But was this the moment that you had the sudden realization there's a massive difference between wrestling and MMA? Your coach had to remind you to strike. Is that right? To finish the match?
You're correct in everything except for this was my first fight ever. It was amateur.
Oh, sorry. So my apologies. Okay.
Fine. I had 6 amateur fights before I had my pro debut. But regardless, there really wasn't any difference. There was no difference. It was so unregulated at the time. There wasn't commissions involved. The rules were exactly the same. The damage was the same. Now there's kind of protocols to protect amateurs, sometimes bigger gloves and shin pads and things. That was not the case for us. It was no holds barred. It was the same as a pro fight. So you might as well call it pro.
Wow. Okay. Because, that was a mistake by me. I meant to say amateur. When you did turn pro, you had 6 fights under your belt. Is that right? 5 wins, 1 defeat, turned pro. I was going to ask you, was there much of a difference? But you just said there wasn't really, was there?
Yeah. There was difference. Yeah. So I feel like I had that experience coming in as a pro. The only difference in my pro debut was that it was a tournament. That was a thing back then. And it was same night tournament, which was crazy.
So how difficult was that, Miesha, to fight more than one fight in one night?
It's so difficult. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like even seeing other athletes do it. It's not really a thing anymore because it's so taxing and so hard. And really, there's a lot of bias that goes into a tournament when we know styles make fights, right? That's not a secret anymore. I think we're all educated enough that some fighters match up differently where they take a lot of damage, and other fights are, 6-second knockout. You never know what you're going to get. So I hate single night tournaments because not only do you get that adrenaline dump and then you've got to try to get it back up again, but the damage can be different, especially for my style at the time. I was very much just like, I'm just going to get hit until I can grab you. Okay. I didn't know how to strike. I was so rudimentary. I really did not move well. I didn't understand head movement. So I kind of had a very grinding style. And when I would get you down on the ground, you were definitely going to be smothered and uncomfortable, but I tended to take damage on the feet. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. You had the heart of a lion throughout your entire career. I remember, I don't know, do you know Wayne McCullough, a boxer from Belfast originally, lives in Las Vegas, spends time in LA as well?
Definitely recognize the name.
Yeah. So he's a friend of mine. And you're talking about your style. He had a similar style, and some people criticized him for it. He had the heart of a lion. He could walk through a storm of punches and he was never knocked off his feet, fought 11 world champions, never stopped, never knocked off his feet. And Ring Magazine named him the toughest chin in boxing. I said, Wayne, what an incredible honor. He said, it is, but does that also mean I get hit? He didn't know what way to take it.
That's what everyone would always say, like, oh, Miesha, she's so tough. And I'm like, I'm not sure if that's what I want my number one takeaway to be. I was like, maybe I should rethink some of these strategies. But, it is what it is. It's my nature. I certainly feel like I'm never out of a fight until I am absolutely done. Like, you have to finish me, because if you don't, I'm coming for you. And I'm always proud of that. But the second chapter, I'm certainly trying to sustain less damage. Not always successful, but I'm working.
You talked about not enjoying the tournaments, and I fully understand why. But you did quite well in them. You won the Strikeforce Women's tournament. What year was that? That was
2009, 2010.
Yes, 2010, wasn't it?
10, yeah.
Yeah, and then you won the Bantamweight Championship as before that, actually.
Yeah, yep, it was.
Now, the tournament launched you, is it fair to say, onto a world title shot with Strikeforce? Okay,
Yes.
which you won in 2011. Miesha, talk to us about your mindset leading up to the fight, after the fight. What was that moment like for you?
Gosh. Well, I remember that I had a torn MCL, a grade 3 tear in my knee going into that fight, that world title fight with Marlos Kunin. But I had a lesser knee injury that I had postponed that fight already once for. And then I sustained a worse knee injury. So I had like a bursitis the first time around. My leg was huge. Then I was dealing with bursitis and a torn MCL. And I just said, you know what? I'm not listening to anybody this time. Like the first time they're like, you do not want to go into a 5-round fight with a killer like Marlos Kunin, or ever, not 100%. I mean, or as close, reasonably close to 100%. So I listened the first time, and then the second time I was like, okay, I'm even worse off now. Who's to say that it's ever going to be better? I was like, if I don't take this fight now, I might not get the opportunity. And I was like, and I know I can do this regardless. Like I have to be prepared to be the best, even when I'm not physically at 100%. I still have to be the best. So I took the fight. I stayed with it. And
is it true, Miesha, that a lot of fighters say the truth is you never compete at 100%? Would you agree with that?
I think that's very fair to say. I don't know if we, I mean, the reason I say that, I mean, I have went into fights uninjured, which I would basically consider, 100%, but 100% is a moving target in my mind. You never, once you get close to 100, that 100 now is, it's like the dangling carrot. So nobody, I think, ever reaches 100% because it always moves. I mean, and that's not just for fighters, it's for people in general. If you're striving for a target, you learn something one day, you're better than you were the day before that, and you could continue to grow and become better than that. So there is no such thing as 100% in my mind. There's no such thing as 100%. I have gone into fights relatively unscathed, no major injuries or things like that, feeling really, really good, which I guess you would consider, right? That's pretty close to 100%. But me, conceptually, I think I just think of things a little bit different than other people.
I think it's a good attitude, actually. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Sorry, I did interrupt your story. So you've been crowned champion of the world. Now, Miesha, I need to ask you, because I always find this very interesting, and several boxers have told me this, including my friend Wayne. You're so long preparing yourself physically, mentally for this journey, this dream of becoming a world champion. It's one thing to get there and finally realize the dream. It's quite another thing afterwards to stay at the top. Was that a difficult thing for you? Scary, maybe?
Oh, absolutely. I admire these long reigning champions because it's so difficult to quantify how hard that is to do because you're always fighting the next best person. If you're not the champ, like you might get some that's like, oh, this is a good matchup, or that one's a tougher one. No, this is number one contender, finally I'm there, but it's kind of like, it can be much. When you are the champion, you're always fighting the next contender, and they're always so hungry because 9 times out of 10, they have yet to get where you are. Now, obviously, we have seen a couple of champions come back and be crowned again, but I would say typically this is the next hungry lion who's trying to take you out, and you constantly have a lion on your back. You constantly have that target of somebody who wants to take you out. So it's relentless. It's absolutely relentless. So a lot of respect for those fighters that are able to maintain that status for long periods of time, because it's certainly more challenging than it might even seem to the outsider.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well put. Your first title defense was supposed to be against Sarah Kaufman. Then there was this fighter, a new fighter in Strikeforce, you know who I'm talking about, by the name of Ronda Rousey. Now, I need to ask you about what happened at this time, because I'm not for 1 second putting Ronda Rousey in the same bracket as Muhammad Ali, but her tactic of almost talking herself into a world title fight reminded me of that. And people at the time were annoyed with Ali. Who is this kid? Cassius Clay at the time. So is it fair to say this is obviously where the rivalry stemmed from? Did she rub you up the wrong way? This new kid, I think she had only 4 fights, and she's coming in calling the shots, and she got her title shot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I, at the time, didn't understand, what that even meant. And I do think that that's a fair comparison to Ollie in a lot of ways, because she did come up, with this brash kind of attitude. You have to understand that the women's MMA community up to that point kind of had this sort of sense of community and camaraderie because it was us against them. Even though it was us against us, it was more so us against them. And we had to kind of gel together at first to get a footing. And Ronda kind of came in marching to the beat of her own drum and was like, basically like, F all you all. I am not here to make any friends. I don't care whose toes I have to step on. I'm going to do. And now I understand it. Like, I get it. And in hindsight, I can see what a great thing that was, honestly, for the sport at the time. So we really did need somebody to branch out and be brash and be different. And even for me, how it impacted my career. Like, I'm very grateful that I had a nemesis like Ronda, that I had a foe like Ronda. Because without her, my career, I don't think ever could have reached the heights that it reached. And without her, I don't think that women's MMA necessarily reached the heights that it would have reached. I think that's obvious. But at that time, it just felt so wrong. Like, it just felt like, wait, this is not how we do it. Like, we're supposed to be like women lifting women here. Like, we're working together, because it's kind of the guys against us a little bit, it's like we have some proving to do and we got to do it. We're stronger in numbers together. But, I see now that there was a value in what, a massive value in what Ronda brought. So she wasn't wrong.
Okay. It's interesting. And, years later, Conor did something similar in the men's game, didn't he?
Yeah.
Like him or hate him for it, it was effective. And he got attention. Okay, so you did fight Ronda. You took a little criticism in this fight when she got you in the armbar and you refused to tap out. Now, I even now, Miesha, I look at the video and I'm like, looking at your arm like this. What is it at that moment? Is it the fighter's instinct of never give up? Is it stubbornness? Is it your hatred for your opponent? What is it at that time? Is it a bit of all?
I certainly think there's a lot that goes into that moment, but it comes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the interview, fight or flight. What's the instinct when you don't have time to think about it? And for me, it's fight. And that's one of those moments that I didn't have very much time to think about it. It was just my instinct not to give up. I was like, I am not giving up. I'm not going to give up. And that was it. I mean, it wasn't even that long of a thought process. It was literally instinct. It's just how I felt in the moment, was just that split decision second before the arm breaks to quit or not. And I didn't even have a chance to formulate a cognitive thought about it. It just was instinct.
Mm-hmm. And that what was so huge about that moment was that, Dana White, the president of the UFC, has said that moment, that fight, was what changed his mind about women in the UFC. Something he very boldly said would never happen. I could never understand why he came out with that statement. It wasn't really for him to say, I felt.
Contradict himself later. That's why.
Yes. Well, he had some humble pie after that one, but I'm pretty sure he's happy how wrong he was. But because that was such a monumental moment in women's sport, in women's MMA, do you ever stop and actually think how hugely important your name, Miesha Tate, is to the fight game? Because that was such a monumental moment. And I want you to actually stop for a moment and appreciate that.
I have taken a step back, especially in that period of retirement, the nearly 5 years that I took off and started a family. And I really reflected and just learned a lot about myself, did a lot of soul searching. And it sounds cliche, but yeah, I did look back and say, you know what? I can look at that and be proud of that moment. For a long time, it was a moment that it wasn't a good moment for me. I wasn't happy about it. It was bittersweet. It was at best, it was the moment I lost my world title to my biggest rival, to someone I absolutely couldn't stand. So it was like, that was not a good moment for me. It was not something I want to sit back and be like, yeah, remember that time? Like, oh, like burn my cookies. But
burn your cupcakes.
Yes, exactly. So but in becoming a mother, in becoming more connected to my being and my purpose, I'm able to look back at those moments now with a fondness and say, hey, like I said, my attitude now, it wasn't always that, but is that I won. I won. I gave it my 100%. There's no shame in losing. There's only shame in not giving your best. I gave my best. I came up short. I can look at that moment now and say, hey, that forever changed the landscape of women's MMA. I didn't know at the time, but it changed the landscape of my career. It gave me a ton of opportunities. It showed also how tough women can be, right? I think that's something that I can lift my head up at the end of the day and say, hey, I may not have won that fight. I may not have been the champion, leaving the cage that night. I want to say Octagon, but it was Strikeforce, so I guess it's cage. But there were a lot of victories that I got to take away from it, and that's one of them. So I can honestly say that, that does feel good.
Fantastic. And I think it'll even feel better as time goes on, Miesha, because it's just such a huge, huge moment. And I love moments like that. And I love people who change the game. And you're certainly up there with the best of them. So you did rematch UFC 168. Unfortunately, you couldn't recapture the title. This rivalry really escalated at that point. It was like boiling point. Now, you did really well. It was like back and forth. It was almost like watching a Rocky movie. I've never seen a crowd rally behind a fighter. It seemed like everyone in the arena wanted you and they were willing you on to win. As a fighter competing, do you feed off the energy of the crowd? Do you even notice it? You're so focused? Because I often wonder this.
I do notice it. So being focused doesn't always mean that everything else is gone. Being focused means that you can interpret things on the outside, but that it doesn't deter you, or that it doesn't change the focal point. It's like peripheral vision, right? It's like you can have your focus vision, but it doesn't mean that you can't notice things on the outside, but you never break that focus, straightforward vision. So absolutely, at times I do. Sometimes I hear the commentators talking about
they're so close, aren't they?
Oh yeah, it's very interesting. Or you hear chants going on, but you're still so focused on the task at hand that it's just kind of like a little wave that kind of just goes by and you notice it, but it changes nothing. It doesn't matter if they were booing or if they were cheering. It's just something that's noticed. That's all.
Unfortunately, you didn't win, but this is what I love most about you. You're always gracious in victory or defeat. I love this. And I think it sends a beautiful message to anybody involved in sport. The very first thing you did, you got up, respect. Let's put the differences aside. It was a fair fight. You won. You put out your hand to shake Ronda's hand and she blatantly refused. How did you feel about that at the time? And looking back, how do you feel about that now?
At the time, I didn't necessarily expect her to shake, but I did think that she would shake my hand at that point. I think that's why I went for the gesture. But I had also learned that I didn't want anyone else to change who I am. So regardless of her reaction, I knew that there was a chance she wouldn't, but that's who I am. I'm the person to shake the hands. I'm the person to show the respect. So regardless if I think that I'm going to get it back, if someone's going to disrespect me, I'm still going to be true to who I am. And that was important for me in that moment. And she chose not to accept it. And that's fine because I think she was staying true to who she is. And at the end of the day, we can all respect somebody who is staying true to who they are. It doesn't mean that you have to like it, though. I think that I don't think it necessarily won her over many other fans that night, But, it's to each his own. And now how I feel about it is it's just water under the bridge. I don't really hold the same animosity. How do I say that? I don't hold the same animosity for Ronda as I did in that first part of my life because there's just so much more to life than to being angry at people or being upset about situations. You kind of just got to get to a point where you mature and you realize, like, it's at the end of the day, we all live, we're all going to die, like, she's a mom now. I have 2 kids. I mean, life just, and when you have children, that's another thing. The perspective changes so much. I'm a much more in tune, caring, loving person in general now that I have children. And, yeah, I mean, she's never probably going to be somebody that's like a best friend or anything like that. But I don't know. I'm not holding on to anything. I'm not holding on to any grudges, Yeah. And I'm not saying though that if I didn't get one more crack at it, that I wouldn't. I would absolutely love the opportunity, but I would never call somebody out who, she's doing her own thing and she's happy. And so, I'm happy for her. I think becoming a mom is one of the best blessings. So anybody who gets to experience that too, it's all good. Honestly, for me today, it's all good.
I love the how at peace you are with it. It's fantastic. Now, it really is. Can I backtrack for a second? You're talking about that was you as a person. That's why you made the gesture. I want to give a little bit of credit to your parents for that, because they obviously did a great job in raising you. So shout out.
So my parents, hats off to them, and particularly my mom. She had the heavy hand, the heavy lifting. My dad was the financial backbone. He was gone a lot driving trucks. He worked for a moving company, so he was gone a lot of the time. So my mom did the heavy lifting when it came to raising us. And but I got a lot of love from my parents. Always taught me to be kind and respectful, and also very importantly, never to like judge anybody. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the color of their skin. Doesn't matter the economic background. It doesn't matter. You be kind. And you treat people with respect, regardless of who they are. If they're the waiter at your table, if they're the person cleaning up the table, if they're the janitor, you treat everybody the same. That's something my mom always really instilled to me. She always used to encourage me to be the kid on the playground to go and make friends with the person who had no friends.
Okay, yeah, nice.
I still have friends to this day who are, maybe a little mentally slow, or, maybe a little physically disabled. I still have friends from my grade school, because just the gesture of like, hey, do you want to come play with us? Like the little outcast or whatever, and those still to this day are some of the truest, most genuine friends I've ever had. They'll be there to support me every single time, win or lose. Like, they're not the flighty friends. And so, no, these are the things that my mom taught me. And I think that
fantastic.
Was for me that mattered. It's a continuation of everything that she instilled in me.
Oh, I love it. You're talking about, that's something so simple, so small to you, hey, come play with us, or come talk to me, or that's huge to somebody else, isn't it? So it's my mother says the same thing. She says, it costs manners cost nothing.
Nothing. And being kind is actually a very selfish thing to do, because it feels good. It feels really good to help other people. Helping other people, offering a smile, just helping someone else in a situation, it feels damn good. There's little else in the world that if you can really give to somebody who needs and appreciates, that's one of the best feelings.
Brilliant. Great message. Okay, so you did finally win your world UFC title. What a fight this was. It was back and forth. I like Holly Holm. I think she conducts herself in a very respectful way also. Talk to me a little bit about Holly Holm and the fight, and then I want to talk to you about the finish before that.
Oh, I'm a huge Holly Holm fan. I think she's just a spectacular woman in person. But nonetheless, I had a job to do on that day. She signed on the dotted line. I remember looking at myself in the mirror moments before walking out to the title and telling myself with affirmations that this is the last time I will see myself and not have a belt wrapped around my waist and not be a UFC world champion. Like, in this moment, I'm not. The next moment I see myself, I will be. And that's what, I had to go out there and dig deep and get it done in the 5th round. It kind of had to throw all caution to the wayside because I didn't want it to go to the judges. I mean, at best case scenario, it was going to end up a tie, which doesn't make me a world champion.
Yeah, of course. Doesn't
make me a world champion. So,
and you know what? When you sunk in that rear neck chokehold, is that how you call it?
Yeah.
Miesha, the expression on your face, and all I
Yeah.
see is the years, the hard work, the dedication, the sacrifice, the commitment. It meant everything to you. You could see it.
Oh,
But she wouldn't give up. She would
oh.
not tap.
That was the longest 6 or 7 seconds of my life. I thought, and I was like, "Am I doing this right?" I mean, I was like, I've been choking people for a long time, and I'm pretty sure this is dead to rights. Like, it doesn't get any tighter than this. And I was like, "Can she breathe through her ears? Like, what is going on?" And then, and then I felt her like kind of throw punches, and she was out, and the ref was in there pulling my arms off, and at that moment, I realized, damn, she went out on her shield, and oh yeah, I'm a world champ.
Unbelievable. Yeah, just to credit Holly Holm for a moment, like she was literally gone and she started throwing punches. That was, the fighter's instinct. But Miesha, that was your moment. And it was so emotional to look at it. You could just see it meant everything. You were so grateful for the moment and the people. I loved how you didn't just give me my belt. You were hugging everybody on your team. You appreciated everyone who helped get you there as well. And I think we learned a lot about you as a person that night as well. You did go on to defend the belt against Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes is a fantastic athlete as well. It was very refreshing, I have to say, the Holly Holm fight and the Amanda Nunes fight, to see the respect between you and your opponents. There was a lot of respect. I like that. I don't really like the trash talking, I have to say. I know it can sell tickets and all of that, but Amanda Nunes, that was a tough night at the office.
Yeah, that one wasn't one of my favorite nights, but no, it's all good too. Like, I'm okay with it because I had to hit rock bottom before I was going to make some changes that I needed to make. Okay. And that was the start of the fall. Really, actually, I would say even the Holly Holm fight was really when I was starting to become unraveled. It's just that I was able to master it, cover it enough one more time. Mm-hmm. But after that, it really just started to go downhill. I was just burnt out, and I needed it though, because without knowing your low point, I don't know if you can know your high point, if you can really appreciate the high point.
Yeah, so absolutely.
It was good. It was good for me in hindsight because it gave me everything that I have now. That was the start of the rock bottom, and but I could truthfully say I'm grateful for it.
Good. I love that. You're talking about learning from all of these experiences. That's a great attitude to have. You did regroup and you came back and you fought Raquel Pennington, is it? Yes. And you announced your retirement after this. Now, 5 years out of the game, and then you came back. So talk to me a little bit about you're talking about hitting those lows. So I think you've just explained why you decided to retire. Tell me why you decided to come back, and in the meantime, becoming a mother of two beautiful children. Am I saying it right? Amaya and Daxton?
Yes.
And Amaya looks just like you, and Daxton looks just like Johnny, I think. It's like carbon copies there.
Honestly, they look like each other too. I can't say that I really decided to come back because it's just one of those things. It's not like it's not really a choice. I mean, I suppose I could have not listened to it, but I've always listened to those premonitions. It's how I ever got where I was. Just not being afraid to listen to the little whisper or that little call or the little flame and just say, hey, I'm feeling this way. And then asking myself why. And it really boiled down to, I think, the reason that came together at that moment was that I was thinking about the things that are most important to me. It was during the pandemic and the whole world had shut down. And I was like, the most important things to me in my life are family and friends, time, and dreams. I would probably put dreams as the second one and then time, because we don't really always value time the way that we necessarily should. Absolutely. We have a lot of it, but not a lot of it. And I started to think, what do I want to do with my time? What are my dreams? And how does it benefit me and my family? And that really why I started asking myself those things is because I already had this premonition that's like feeling that I wanted to fight again. And so it was just kind of a matter of me consulting myself in it and making sure that was how I felt. And it was. And I'm so glad that I answered that call because I'm really happy with where I'm at now. I came back, I finished a woman who had never been finished ever in the UFC. She may not have had, the best record in the UFC, but she was tough and hard to.
And that was a tough first fight back after 5 years.
Yeah, after 5 years, she's just outside of the top 10. So that jumped me right into the number 8 spot. And right then we fast forward on to Ketlin Vieira, who was ranked just a little bit above me, but right around that top 5, already second fight back, 5 years off, 2 kids, like no easy feat for sure. And that was a narrow loss. I still look at that as a narrow win for me, though. It's just my mindset where I'm going with this, because if I put everything forth, it is a win. I came that night, I showed up, I did a lot of work, definitely some things that I could have done better, absolutely. And I definitely could have hit the gas pedal harder in that fight. There's no doubt about it. I had a lot more in the gas tank, and that's perhaps the most frustrating part. I was more focused on the skill set, and my conditioning was, my skill, like showing the skill and really trying to land the perfect combo or shot and really set everything up clean, never trying to force anything. But my style sometimes is to force things, It's forget who I am and the roots of who I am. I like to muddy the waters. I like to make things a little bit dirty and gritty. So,
Miesha, I actually have an interesting observation about that fight. So, and I was curious, and I couldn't wait to ask you, because I know the fight was postponed the first time, and you fought because you tested positive for COVID, wasn't it? Now, I had COVID as well, and I know it affects everybody differently, but I remember thinking it was a full month before I felt like myself again. And you're talking about having a fight 2 months later, and then the preparation that goes into that. Do you think that played a part at all?
It's hard to say it did or didn't. I mean, it took me about a month as well before I started to feel like myself, but I feel like I was in such good condition before that I got COVID that I feel like once it was over, I bounced back just fine. I certainly don't adhere myself to the idea that COVID had any reason to do with why I lost, because I know that I had more in the gas tank than what I offered that night. And that's the most frustrating part. Is like I had more that I could have delivered, and I fought at a pace that was just, more and more, more to Ketlin's pace than my own pace. And so no, I don't blame it on COVID at all. But the only thing that I can say is that I know that I can give more, and I will never make that mistake again.
Fantastic. Learn as you go on. Yeah. And I love, like I said, I love that you continually say that you're always learning. I always say, no matter what it is, no matter what your area of expertise is, the day you think you know it all, you're in trouble. That's what I say anyway.
It's so true. That's why I keep telling you. That's why I say 100% is a very elusive mark. You really never reach it. I don't think you ever reach 100%. Nobody does. And
no.
Why it's a fun goal to strive for, because I think as we continue to do that, we're just going to continue to level up. At least that's what I'm trying to do over here. Level up and get and go down in weight.
Aren't we all? So you have your next fight coming up against Lauren Murphy. We talked about your preparation for that. One thing I want to talk to you outside of fighting, you've just launched your new website. Do you want to tell people a little bit about that?
I would love to. Yeah, it's MieshaTate.net. And we're doing a lot of fun things on there. Finally have a great team around me, because Lord knows I don't have the time to do these things. But my team has been fantastic. I have my own apparel line. I have my own clothing. So it's pretty cool. I've always wanted to own a small business, and this feels like the first time I can actually say that I'm a small business owner. I've been a huge supporter of small businesses for many years now. So I appreciate anybody who wants to share that. I have cool things too, like water bottles, because I hate single-use plastic. You're going to see my personality come out a lot in here, and no plastic bags, all that fun stuff you'll probably be able to see and or purchase on my website. But it's a cool place for you to be able to keep up with me at the end of the day, and chance to win prizes like signed gloves, autographed pictures, personalized videos as well. If you're familiar with Cameo, we're going to be doing things like that.
Fans will love that. Fantastic.
Yeah, so contest winnings, even in the future, probably tickets to my fights as we continue to grow. If you're really, a great fan and you the things about me. We're doing contests. We're doing all kinds of fun things. So I want to be able to give back. As I mentioned, it's a great feeling to give back. I've had such a great support through the community of MMA and beyond. So we're going to continue to do the same back for my fans.
You do, Miesha. You're very good at interacting with your fans. I have to say, give you credit for that. Miesha, just quickly, I want to give you, I had a couple of questions submitted from people that are going to be watching this. The first one is from John O'Kane. John is a friend of mine, actually, and a former professional football player, used to play for Manchester United. What he said was, I always admired Miesha. She always had class in victory and, more importantly, in defeat. But what I want to know is, who does Miesha consider the greatest of all time, male or female?
Oh, man. Well,
and you can just give short answers to these so we can.
Sure. I mean, greatest of all time is another one of those really difficult to sort out. But I'm going to say I think Demetrius Johnson is certainly on my Mount Rushmore of best fighters ever. And I think George St. Pierre. And that should be a bias. It could, I don't know. I mean, for me, I just think he's so close to perfect. It's not always just about like wins and losses for me. This, again, subjectively, is that I look at fighters sometimes like how well they can perform and how consistently throughout fights. And I just feel like GSP was one of the most consistent to ever deliver and do it. So I always try to model myself after him, to be honest.
What a compliment. What a compliment. Yeah, he had a touch of class about him, didn't he? Okay, next question is from Ger Sheehan in Wicklow in Ireland. And his question is, do you have any regrets? I think I know the answer to this. Do you have any regrets over retiring when you did? And did you ever stop to think how your career would have panned out if you didn't retire?
Oh, I certainly stopped to think about that. It would have plummeted probably beyond a salvageable place. I would have been cut from the UFC. I would have continued to lose fights, and I wouldn't have had a place to come back to after the time that I needed off to regroup and really find myself. So that's the answer. It was definitely the right thing to do. I needed it, or I would have been, just fighting for half of a paycheck every time that I was allowed to.
Okay. Yeah, you listened to your body and took the right decision. Well done. Okay, next question is from Szymon Schott in Krakow in Poland. And his question is, he's talking about, in the past, young people looked for inspiration in athletes and champions. They tried to imitate them as a model of self-discipline, strength, commitment, and daily training. Today, many young people are inspired by internet celebrities, huge amounts of likes and followers. The young people are more interested in YouTube fights, we know what he's talking about, than the professionals. Is that a concern for the future of the sport?
I've definitely thought about that will there ever become a day when, the future doesn't, future generations don't appreciate what we can do with our bodies because what they can do on the internet is limitless, in a way, you could do things that are not humanly possible. You could fly and stuff on the internet, you know what I mean? So I've definitely thought about that, and I've tried not to let it be something that's all consuming because we don't know what the future holds. And hopefully there's always an appreciation for the things that people do through hard work and by dedicating themselves. And I do think that there will always be a place to have that type of work ethic admired because I know not everybody has the will or desire to do it. So hopefully it'll always be something that's admirable.
Absolutely. Final question from me. Obviously you came back from retirement and, retirement is the last thing on your mind. You're focused on another world title, and we will support you every step of the way with that. But when it is all said and done, Miesha, in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, how would you like the fans to remember you?
Well, I would like the fans to remember me as somebody who had a hard work ethic, who didn't give up, who did the things that we all need to do as humans along the way. We all have to take time for ourselves sometimes and regroup and figure it out. And that's it. Just somebody who persevered and a person that was following their dreams. Nothing major. I just want people to have those takeaways and hopefully the little things that they can use to kind of make themselves better each day, just remembering what we're capable of.
Fantastic. Love it. What a positive message. Miesha, you're loved and admired all over the world. You really are. You're always gracious in victory and defeat. We support you every step of your way to your next world title. I believe it's your destiny. I hope maybe you can come back on next time when you win it and talk to us about it. That would be fantastic. What I admire most, Miesha, is just how you conduct yourself, the person you are, and the positive message that you send to everybody. And you're talking about setbacks and letdowns and not be knocked by that, but to learn from it and to make it, to fuel your fire even more. And, you're encouraging words for anybody chasing a dream. Doesn't matter if it's sports or in any walk of life.
It's not meant to be easy. If it's easy, you're probably not doing the right thing, and you're not necessarily going to get the fulfillment. At least I believe that you will if you do something that's really difficult and challenging and makes you want to punch holes in the walls and cry at times. Like, that's the reality of it. If you think anybody who's pursuing a crazy dream or their ambition is above it, you're crazy. Like, everybody's going through those tough emotions when they're trying to find their true greatness. They're trying to find the brink of their potential. It's going to push you into those places where it's like you have to overcome or it's gonna take you out of it, and it's like that battle, that constant battle. So just remember that, following your dreams doesn't mean that it's all glory and great and wonderful and bliss. Like, no, it's like, it's hard, but it's okay to be human. It's okay to feel those things at times and to be frustrated and mad and still get up and conquer the day and the world and go after those dreams. So
cue the Rocky music. I love it. Miesha, if your dreams aren't scaring you, they're not big enough. How's that?
Absolutely.
Boom.
You have great insight as well, and your artwork kicks ass too.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it was the only way I could get you on the canvas.
You know what? And that may be a smart way to look at that, for sure.
Oh no, it was an honor. I'm so glad that you love it. It was just what a special moment in your career. So it meant a lot for me to capture that for you.
Definitely. Thank you for that.
Okay, Miesha, thank you so much. I've taken far too much of your time. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon, my friend. Okay.
Alrighty. Bye.
God bless. Take care. Bye-bye.